Today, the NCAA announced its punishment for Penn State football in the wake of the Sandusky sex abuse scandal. And Andrew, bring us up to speed because it was pretty swift and pretty harsh.
It depends on who you ask, Rich. The Penn State football program fined $60 million and will not be allowed to compete in postseason bowls for 4 years. And today, Penn State said it accepts the penalties, and the university officials signed an agreement with the NCAA, which means they will not appeal the punishment. With a long list of penalties, the NCAA effectively crippled the Penn State football program for years.
No price the NCAA can levy will repair the grievous damage inflicted by Jerry Sandusky on his victims. However, we can make clear that the culture, actions, and inactions that allowed them to be victimized will not be tolerated in collegiate athletics.
On the Penn State campus, shocked students watched as the punishment was announced. A $60 million fine equal to 1 year gross revenue of the football program. That money will go to programs to prevent child abuse or assist victims. A 4-year ban on postseason bowl games. All wins from 1998 to 2011 vacated, so Paterno is no longer the winningest coach in NCAA football history. And a loss of 20 scholarships per year over 4 years and 5 years probation.
I don't think it's necessary. I don't think the NCAA should have the authority to do something like this.
It could have been worse. The NCAA didn't impose the so-called death penalty and suspend the football program.
Suspension of the football program would bring with it significant unintended harm to many who had nothing to do with this case.
Yesterday, Penn State officials removed the iconic statue of Joe Paterno from its place outside Beaver Stadium.
Football does not run this university. We're a community.
The Paterno family slammed Penn State for accepting the penalties. They called it a panicked response to the public's understandable revulsion at Jerry Sandusky's crimes. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you. And joining Dominic and I are Lou Rahm, football reporter and columnist for the Bleacher Report, veteran journalist. Rahm has been published in the LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle, Tampa Tribune, and so on. And we're also joined by former Penn State football player Gerald Filardi. And Gerald's been good enough to join us before. Gerald played linebacker for Penn State in the 90s. In fact, his coordinator, Jerry Sandusky, and head coach, obviously, Joe Paterno. And I'm going to start with you because they talk about the family of Penn State, and the alumni are a tight-knit group, certainly guys who played football here. What was your reaction when you heard Emmert lay down the penalties and really, and many say, a nuclear winner for Penn State?
It was another blow. It was another blow where I think we were a little bit more prepared this time because we knew it was coming, as opposed to when we heard about, Jerry's issues coming out. So it's a big blow, but I think. Are the penalties warranted? I don't think there's, in this whole thing, anything's going to warrant what happened to the victims. So I'll let that be said that there's nothing, there's no value, there's nothing. So obviously we're going to have to deal with what's came out. Do I agree with it fully? Not necessarily. I think there's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. I think a little bit more of time could have been taken place as far as what the NCAA investigation, going by the free report and not doing some of their own due diligence. I think.
Well, the university hired free, and
right.
I heard some people say, "Hey, listen, we paid for a report here that basically shut us down." And just to put it in context for people, when they talk about no bowls for 4 years, cutting the scholarships from 25 to 15, letting people, giving the kids understandably, waiving any kind of waiting period if they're going to transfer. And also, $60 million here, which is the revenue for 1 year for football. Translate that into what that will do to a football program, especially one that has to play in the Big Ten.
In a sense, I feel it is the death penalty. I think it's a different version if you're looking back to SMU in their scandal and what they got. I think the NCAA learned a little bit of something from that. But also, how do you put into perspective what SMU did and the Penn State situation? So the NCAA obviously has to do something above and beyond that, in the sense of, we're not going to shut down the football program, but we have to show that we're doing, not literally shutting it down.
Lou, can you put in context, because I've heard people say there is no really comparison, because SMU, basically you walked on campus and you had shoulder pads, you were going to get a nice check. Some said they paid better than the pros at the time. But that impacted the competitive balance. This was, I think by definition, institutional control, the top levels of a school that allowed basically a pedophile to perpetrate in their midst. Is there any comparison that can be drawn here?
There's really no comparison within college football, within the NCAA. This is a whole different ball game. And it's interesting because generally when you're talking about major heavy sanctions like this from the NCAA, you're hearing people talk about the lack of institutional control. And in this case, I think what the penalty comes down for really is an absolute institutional control, to the point that anything negative doesn't come out. And people suffer for it, kids suffer for it, whoever suffers for it. And some would say all with the number one thing being the goal is to protect the university, protect the program, protect the reputation and the legacy of the people running the school.
We're going to bring in our audience in this in a little bit, but Gerald, one thing that obviously came down over the last 72 hours is the statue.
Right.
Paterno's wins were also vacated. You're one of the final classes here whose records are going to stay on board until this new group comes in.
Right.
Forever, Paterno's legacy, if there was any question after Friday, this weekend kind of cemented it. His name may stay in the library, but it's nowhere going to be near the football stadium, and
Right.
certainly not in the record books.
It's tough to swallow. It's especially for those kids that played during those times. I feel for them today because unfortunately, I said this last time, innocent people get hurt. They went to Penn State for a reason. They went there and because they had integrity, they had a commitment, they were honest, and they worked hard, and they took their standards seriously above and beyond what the NCAA standard was. That's what Penn State was about. So for them to go in and do what they were supposed to do, put up wins, play football the right way, and the Penn State way, is unfortunate that they're affected by this. Now, as far as Paterno, whether he made the right decision or wrong decision, I don't know. Statue comes down. I could see why, again, the victims in mind. You mentioned this last time about having kids and putting that into perspective. Absolutely.
In fact,
you don't want to be run.
the president of the university, when speaking about this, said that the statue would be a source of division and an obstacle to healing the idea of people walking by it. And that's not what people wanted to see when they walked into a football game, to be reminded every time. And when game day rolled in, what would be said. You think the program will ever recover?
I think it will. It's going to take a long time.